Ledan means farmhouse in Swedish.
Yes, I do. Actually, I thought it meant barn, B-A-R-N,
Well, I guess
like a
that's
like a farm barn,
same
like
thing,
a
I
yeah.
guess.
Well, a
Kind
farmhouse
of.
is where people
Well,
live. I thought that was where the
yeah.
animals live. So it's actually Persian. It's a flower in Persian. So, but I didn't mind being called a barn. That's cool. Especially, why not? Quite different from Persian. I think it means something in another language too. I'm trying to think, like Croatian or Slovakian or something. I think it is also used, but yes, my name means barn. But no, my parents are not Swedish, so they didn't want to name me after a barn. And I wasn't conceived in a barn, I don't think. I could ask them, but that could cause an embarrassing conversation,
Oh,
which,
these would be strange.
yeah,
So let's
yeah.
look a little bit more
And I
at.
remember you telling me, Affinity, your parents' game as well.
I'm sorry, what?
Is that true?
I missed that. What was that? Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's saying we have an internet connection problem. It's the Atlantic.
Oh well.
So,
I didn't catch your
I was
question.
it. Yeah. What was my question? It was a good question too.
Something about my parents. I don't know.
Yeah, you said that they game, that they're gamers. You told me
Yes.
that. Yeah, that's
Um,
really cool.
my stepdad actually started playing WoW long before I did, and my stepdad actually got me into playing WoW. Um,
Mm.
so he's and he still plays. He doesn't actually like raid or anything, but he does play. Um,
Was-
and that's I think that kind of what makes this a little bit easier. Being able to be in the guild that I am and being able to stream in front of my computer and essentially not go outside or have a social life or what have you is maybe they're a little more understanding of kind of I guess what it might mean.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. I think for a lot of parents, it's interesting because, inevitably when I've done my research, it usually triggers a lot of conversations. So people who don't raid or don't know much about it will usually know somebody who plays games, and they'll say something like, "Oh yeah, my friend's teenage son plays. He never ever leaves the computer. He doesn't go outside, and that's one extreme." Or, World of Warcraft or raiding ruined my friend's marriage, and because he's never home and all that sort of thing. So it runs the gamut as far as the negative comments. It almost always elicits a negative response. It's very rare that I get someone saying, "Oh yes, that World of War is so wonderful, and it's been
Yeah.
great for my friend's marriage or relationship." And so it's kind of interesting. A lot of people just don't understand it. I usually tell people, especially parents, that if you really want to understand, especially if you've got younger kids and that are playing games and you're worried about it, then you should play with them. It's always a weird phenomenon I've found that people don't want to play. Like, they don't like it, but they don't also want to understand it. And I think the best way for parents, especially if they've got young children who maybe are getting into gaming, maybe some of you out there viewers are like that, you've got 9, 10, 11-year-old kids and they want to play a lot more, then obviously I'm speaking to people who understand this already, but my perception is you should engage with the content, and then you understand it better. And it doesn't seem, and then you understand why people might have that somewhat dazed look on their faces when they're engaged. It's not that they're zombies, it's that they're engaged in the experience of play, and it tends to have that kind of immersed facial expression. You do kind of look a bit, spaced out. In fact, I think some people have done a series of photographs and things depicting people while they're engaged in playing games and stuff, and they do look a bit, out there. But we understand what's going on, but for someone who doesn't know, they just look at it as just a negative thing because it looks isolated and removed, but it's no more isolated. In fact, it's a lot less isolated than reading a book. But none of us would ever say reading a book is bad. So.
Right, that's what I was thinking, was you're kind of comparing it to reading a book, where you're just very involved in just what's going on the screen or in the book or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna make an argument about what is antisocial behavior, one could actually posit that reading a book is the most antisocial behavior. It's a very individualized experience, especially if you're reading a good novel or something. It's quite individualized, even subjective, our reaction to what we're reading. So, just because you've read, Twilight, and I've read Twilight, you may hate it, I may love it, it doesn't mean it's going to be the same reaction and experience. Whereas with other things like perhaps a shared gaming experience like group play, dungeons or raiding or whatever, at least you've got a sort of assurance of having some sort of shared activity, which is why I think no one in a million years would ever say reading a book is bad for you. that would be the first thing from anyone's mind. However, I say that's more antisocial than, you know, playing games. But of course, people don't realize that, which is why I try a lot of times to explain to people, as it may look like they're completely zombied out, but it's actually quite different. But, you know, everything in moderation, I suppose. But yeah, so I think it's really cool actually that your parents play. My mum still can't say World of Warcraft, or my dad, one of them. My dad said something recently, he called it War of Worldcraft or something, I don't know, so yeah. Oh cool, I got the chat screen up. You have to behave now, guys.
Oh boy, you just had them going on about Twilight, so that didn't help anything.
Yeah.
So here's a question from Twitter. How's the reception been on this study amongst other researchers in other fields?
It's a very good point, actually. And hey, guys, it's interesting. I've had everything from people making very mocking, negative comments about, you know, studying games and its relevance, and isn't there more important things to study? And then other people who've been very interested. What's interesting about games research as a field is it's still quite new, and so some universities do study it as its own area of study, but then you also have areas that study it in sociology and anthropology. I'm in geography, and a lot of people think, why on earth do you study in geography? Geography is interested in populations, people, and how we move through space and so on, and it's very much a social science as well, but I chose it because of the department in the university, so that's why I'm doing geography. Some people do it in media studies, communication studies, some people are starting to study in economics, business, and they don't always talk to each other, you know, as far as the field goes, but a lot of academics do get together. But I think because it's still quite new, some people are quite negative towards gaming as a study. I've had really negative comments from physicists, which I think is quite funny, and some other sort of more hardcore sort of like geologists and earth scientists. But I think it's more a difference between whether the study of science versus social science. These are some sort of old world kind of conflicts that have existed in academic studies. You know, there's a big three giant areas, which is humanities, which would be like studying literature or art or music, and then you've got, or history, and then you've got the social sciences, which would be sociology, psychology, anthropology, geography, and then you've got the sciences, which would be chemistry, biology, and so on. And sometimes, because the methods that we use to study things is quite different, people don't always like to see eye to eye, and of course that's changing a lot, and people are kind of crossing over a lot more comfortably, but you still find, I think in a lot of other countries as well, can be quite old-fashioned and a bit out of date. So yeah, yes. Oh, I like all the comments. Sorry guys, I shouldn't. Oh wow, people are having their messages deleted. They're not trolling, are they?
They might be.
Oh,
so,
I thought you had sophisticated people in your chat room.
Welcome to streaming. You've got a mix of everything. I think the whole you know, when I had first heard about rating research was when was kind of right about the LFR ban time period, and you had come to Blood Legion and said, you know, hey, we want to do an interview, and then I ended up, you did a roundtable interview with a whole bunch of guilds, and I think Absalom was involved in that from Blood Legion, and then you did kind of a more Blood Legion interview, and I thought it was kind of interesting how you're really focusing on what you call rating research. So my question is, I'd be interested to hear a little bit more about what you classify as rating research. Like, what is your main focus here with this project? Because it's a pretty big project. I mean, you're not just doing a random project, you're getting a PhD in research.
Yeah, well, what I decided to do, because when I first started, and I'm sorry guys, I'm going to bore some of you with this, but when I started, usually when you begin your PhD, you have a series of questions that you're supposed to deliver or develop, and then you sort of spend some time doing your actual research. You gather data basically, and then you write up about it. For me, I had a very sort of general idea. I wanted to study what was happening in raiding. I wanted to document it, how we raid, why we raid, the things that are important to us when we're involved in raiding. So what I wanted to do was find out. I first thought, well, I'll study one group of raiders and then kind of develop what's called an ethnography, which is studying a specific group or studying a group of people. And then I realized it's much more complicated than that. But by studying and talking to people, I started to see what were important to us as raiders. When I say raiders, I mean people who prefer to play the majority of their time spending in the game engaged in raiding, and everything else they do around the game sort of supports their interest in raiding. And if, like, for example, if they're grinding for materials, you know, changing their spec, doing dungeons, raids, whatever they're doing, it's to support their overall preference. Like, for example, if Blizzard said no more raiding, we're closing this part out of the game, you guys would probably find another game to play. So that's what a raid would be. And so that's why I thought, well, I'll study that particular group of people, because no one's actually ever studied us before. And I thought, since I raid as well, and I know you mentioned that recently, I think you asked the question if I do. I haven't raided for about a year because I'm too busy trying to write up my thesis right now, but I do actually raid, and I did raid before. Not the level of Blood Legion or any of the guys I've talked to, but I do like to raid. It's really fun, which is another reason why I thought I could do the research really well, because I understand the community, I know what's going on, I'm not going to be confused by when someone says tier gear or things like that. So that's why I decided to actually to do that. So what I've been finding is a few specific areas of interest, and one is how we arrange our, what I'm calling our play space, and that would be everything from our desks to the interface that we set up. We like to modify things a lot to make us perform better. Like, all of us have different UIs, we use add-ons, software like that. Then there's a lot of questions about how we perform within the game, how groups work together, how we deal with things like success and failure. Failing and wiping endlessly, for example, is a big part of being a raider. Mm-hmm. But I think people don't know about that. We always show, for example, think about this, most videos are kill videos, so it's the first time usually, or sometimes the second time, it's been a successful completed kill of a particular boss. We don't tend, although sometimes we will put videos up for fun, but generally it's not the habit of our community to display the 239 times that we wiped on that boss and kept going back and forth, you know, coming back in and setting up and going off again and having 2 minutes and then wiping and, you know, going over and over again like that. That's not as interesting to us. However, we spend more time failing than we do succeeding, at least until the first time we succeed. Then it becomes easier and then we, you know, go into farm mode and so on. So I thought, this is interesting. We should be writing about this. We're very competitive, and I'd say that competitive attitude actually carries through not just in the way that we raid and like to play, but also carries through into the real world. And of course, competitiveness is different depending on the way that you raid. For example, the importance of competition is going to be much different for guys like Affinity and Blood Legion than they would be for me, who likes to raid 3 or 4 nights a week and has a much more casual kind of silly attitude about it. I might be more interested in, you know, my competition against the actual raid boss, and if I can actually do better than I did last time, so my own improvement on my own performance might be interesting, but that's a form of competition, so competing against myself. Or you guys might be in guilds on your servers where you're competing for server first, so you're not really that interested in world first, but you want to get server first, so that's a form of competition. And then the third area that I'm studying is what's called group formation. So how do we organize our guilds? What's important to us? A lot of times when you guys advertise for people to join your raiding guilds, you'll usually have a long list of things that you don't want in your guild as much as you've got things that you do want. So that's interesting as well. And there's a lot of similarities and there's a lot of distinctions in how we put things together. So those are the 3 main areas that I've been looking at. And that's why I decided, once I had started to study, that I needed to talk to people from lots of different levels of raiding, from the most casual raiders to the most competitive elite raiding guilds, and that's what I've been doing. So that's how it's happened. I'm literally writing up as we speak. In fact, the chapter I'm currently working on is my movement in space chapter, and that's been kind of fun because I had loads of people take photographs of their playing desks areas, like where they play and their computer setup and everything. So I've been doing a bit of analysis of that, and it's been kind of fun and kind of weird. But you guys will probably think it's really strange, but we also, think about it this way, guys, how many websites have you been to where there's always a forum thread where people post their UIs or do things like that? Like, we like to show off what we do to each other, so, you know, it's kind of a part of our culture, if that makes any sense.
Right. So let's look at you've interviewed a lot of people. I mean, quite a few guilds. You've kind of reached out to a lot of top end guilds that other people have never really had the opportunity to do. You've done kind of a one-on-one interview with, Paragon,
Yeah.
with Exodus and Vodka and Blood Legion. Obviously, Blood Legion is a little bit more open now with our live streaming than we were in the past. And then you've got some stuff with,
Yeah.
Stars, and you've got some other, a little more personal interviews with like Athena and Killers and things like that.